All right, everybody, welcome back to Uncle Sam's Mobile Carnival. Actually, that was the United States Marine Corps. I am out now, but today's podcast is with a group of people that I want to change the world with, and it has been fun. Katie, can you give everybody a little bit of a insight of what we talked about today?
I think the better question would be, what did we not talk about? But
Facts.
but to answer your question, we talked about how to radically transform your life, your relationships, your business, and the answer is not what you probably think it is, and you'll discover the answer in the podcast.
Look at the open loop. I love it. I am so proud of you. Brian, what did we get from your side?
Man, my side was just a way to receive and connect with each of you in a more deep, integrous way, starting with myself. And so the reality of it is we did this in our entire show and our whole discussion today. All we've done is lived our truths to give everyone else permission to live theirs. And so there's many moments that I was learning throughout this process, and I'm just here to hopefully try to pass on some of those lessons.
And then when we wrapped the show, we did a 2-hour intervention come to Jesus therapy session with all three of us. But here's what I got: how we went from product to pudge, how values are always the primary and product should always be the secondary. When someone opens up your product or service, can they feel your soul? The 18-inch journey is a two-way street. Are you ignoring your check engine light or paying attention to where it takes you? Are you being praised for your addiction? True strength hides behind vulnerability. Is your default operating system riddled with viruses? Nudges. Do you have a team that nudges you or shackles you? You cannot change what you can't see. What if your feelings were rocket fuel that others didn't have access to? And insight is exhilarating, but it doesn't create change. Boom.
True.
All of that plus a little bit more in today's episode. So we're going to stop this. I'm going to highly recommend you listen, take notes, and send me a DM with the words that say era of you, and you'll find out why in the episode. So without further ado, let's cue the intro. All right, everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George Show, where this one might feel like the peanut gallery or the kids that got in trouble at the principal's office, but I promise you they are not in trouble. I am not holding them hostage. They are here by choice, but let me tell you who is here and why they're here. I would start with my main man, but he's been talked about enough, so let's just talk about the queen of authenticity and power, the woman about putting you back into everything you do, standing with alignment, standing in your belief system, and being unwavering in that, from babies and pudge to the woman who helps realign people to step into their potential and achieve greatness without ever sacrificing anything. A woman of family, a woman of love, a woman of faith, a woman of integrity that you can feel ooze out of every pore of her body. And Brian are on the show today. So let's get into the show.
That was a perfect introduction. Exactly how I would have wanted it done. Thank you.
I I know.
Thanks,
And
Dad.
and Brian's gotten enough of my 8 Mile intros. Like, we have quite a few versions for him, but of course we have the man in the show who will teach you how to embrace pain, to avoid suffering, to uproot your beliefs so you create space to till the soil, to plug into new ones, specifically about making this the era of you. I don't know,
Oh
we'll
man,
stop
I'm
there.
I love it.
so excited to be here with you.
I'm stoked. So for everybody to have some context, two of my dear friends, world changers, big bright lights in the world that I'm honored to call friends and honored to have here. We've been having technical difficulties in making this happen. So they're in a hotel room propped up on pillows with some window light. Brian's wife is running around making them look better. And I keep saying they look like the kids in the office in trouble. But we are excited because we have something to share with all of you. But we're going to save that for down the road. And since Brian, you've been on the show already, Katie, I could never do you justice with your story, but could you give us kind of like the overview on how you just went from, I don't know, you were probably born a badass, but ended up, publicly a badass for the whole world to see to get you to this point?
I am a product designer, and when I had two young kids, I created a brand with products and grew that company into a multi-million dollar international company called Pudge, P-U-J. And we design and manufacture really incredible products that help you simplify parenthood. Ship those to 2,000 stores in the US, 26 different countries. And then 5 years ago, sold that company. And now I full time coach people inside of their business.
And I have to say that 30-second version doesn't do any justice. She was here with
Oh,
us in Vegas doing a Who Stories shoot. 3.5 hours on the couch, and the entire room, we could hear a pin drop in every voice, every connotation, every word, every story, the relatability on so many levels to her story, which is way deeper than that section even
Oh
can come
yes.
close to.
Oh
I can't
yes.
wait for her truth to give others permission to live theirs on an even broader scale, because you were exactly right in how you introduced her. She is a badass on all levels.
Yeah, we'll get there. So Katie doesn't like people to know that she wears a cape, so she hides it. And she's so humble. She's like the Clark Kent walking around here, and everybody wants to know she's Superwoman. So, Katie, we're going a little
You
bit
can be
deeper.
humble and superwoman at the same time.
Yes,
You
I'm not
can.
hiding
Yes,
anything.
you can.
You can. I love it. So, Katie, can I have maybe like a 90-second version of what made Pudge so different and how you saw it differently to get it to the results that you did?
So Pudge was founded on the concept that products were secondary to your relationship with your child.
Mhm.
And as a mother and product designer, I was able to take those principles and infuse those into all of the products that we created. And we very early on identified our values, which were simplifying parenthood, um, independence and freedom, family, and now and wow. And I really feel like taking those values that I live personally and that I believe in and infusing those into every touch point of the business, like that has been the significant key to all of it. And we've been really fortunate to be featured in a lot of incredible places like the Ellen DeGeneres show, the Rachel Ray show, the Today show. My husband and I have been on the cover of Entrepreneur magazine. And when people hear all of that, they want to know the secret. Like, how did you get them to talk about you? How'd you get them to publish you? How'd you get them to put you on national TV? And the truth is, they all came to us because they were magnetically attracted to those values and they could feel something. Like at the end of the day, George, that's what happened. I had people who would meet me at events. I would speak at something. They would come up to me afterwards and say, I knew nothing about you, but I pulled that baby bathtub out of the box and I felt something. I felt like I could feel your soul, is what somebody said to me. And
Mm.
that's what happened. Like when you can know and identify your values and you can infuse that into everything that you're doing inside of your business, magic happens and people feel something. And when somebody feels something versus thinking something, it's much deeper. And you literally make this human connection with people. And that's honestly been the secret to the success of both my physical products company and my coaching.
Mhm. Go ahead, Brian.
Oh, you think I wanted to add to that?
But you always want to add to it. That's what I love. I'm like over it. Brian's like the best hype man we could ever have. I love it. He swears I'm a good communicator, but I take so many notes from him. So Katie, this is
Yeah.
kind of a perfect segue because I think what you nailed more than ever, and the thing that I get from you, like specifically around, and for those wondering, we'll tell you what the Era of You challenge is. It's going to cost you the equivalent of a drip cup of coffee. We'll get there. But when we talk about feeling, Katie, I feel like that's one of the biggest things that's missing in today's world of entrepreneurship and business. And so, Brian, I'm going to parlay to you on this one
Okay.
because you are the king of getting people to actually fall in love with and coexist with their feelings, not denying it, not pushing it down, but giving it a cup of coffee and either saying, sit down, let's have a conversation, or sit down, shut the fuck up. I have work to do and I'll talk to you later. But
Yeah.
either way, you help people relate to those feelings. And so, can you give everybody kind of an overview of like what that's like? Like one of the favorite things that you've ever said to me when you gave that talk at my event was basically embracing pain to avoid suffering, right?
Yeah.
And it's very intentional what it does, but that was part one. Part two that got me was when we talked about coexisting with it to where we could find the triggers and identify them so we knew where to pull the roots out rather than
Yep.
letting them come back over and over and over again. And so I can't even frame this with justice, but can you just give me your Brian spiel on that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll keep it really short and sweet because again, I'm sitting next to the
Don't.
queen and we've got a lot to talk about. But, the core fundamental of it is I had a mental narrative that served me really well for a very long time. Right. And I'm really kind of on this mission to break down this whole idea of like mental toughness and all we need is a good mental state and all we need is a good mentality because it's only half the equation. Because both of our narratives, intellectually and emotionally, can both lie to us. And if we aren't really tapped into understanding both and making sure that 18-inch journey from our head to our heart is a common two-way street that we're constantly communicating back and forth, that's what gives us the ability to see the world more clearly, right? We've lost the art of thinking. We've lost the art of feeling just in general. And so one of the things that I talk about often is not only we need to relearn how to think and feel, but we need to understand how to think about our thinking, think about our feeling, feel our thinking, and feel our feeling in that quadrant. And so the idea of embracing pain to avoid suffering is anytime we feel any kind of negative resistance, anxiety, stress, fear, guilt, shame, you name the emotion, we can call it an emotion, we can label it an emotion, or we can recognize that that's also something that's pointing us at what's important. It's resistance and energy drain in some way or form or fashion. And so I'm in a process right now of taking the emotions and actually delabeling them and recognizing what is the energetic state that I'm in and what is it actually causing? Is it propelled? Is it fueled? Is it directed? Or is there resistance and energy drain that I've got to diffuse? At the end of the day, what we know definitively, and working with some of the world's highest performers, is that it's not just about a strong mental toughness, not just a strong mental narrative. It's about those understanding whether they are hardwired to operate first, intellectually or emotionally, and then learning how to tap into both narratives and balance and regulate between the two, because they both lie to us. And when we embrace the pains that are in front of us, that we see as all of these emotions that come up in front of us, we understand what they are, and we put in the work to become aware, own them, unroot them, and start to move through them. That's when we create a little bit more freedom. So to what Katie said on this whole concept of feeling, we are a dynamic feeling being, period, end of story, right? And so when we can feel, that's when we get moved. One of my core philosophies as well is that I learned very early not to get stuck by what has happened to me, but instead get moved by what I can do with it. And here's the reality: moved people move people. So if we can recognize that it's really the whole dynamic self that allows us to move through the world, connect deeper with people, connect deeper with ourselves, connect deeper with those that we're doing this for and the businesses that we propel forward, that's when we create freedom. And that's truly the baseline of why I want to align with both of you, because you both identify and tap into that philosophy deeply in your own worlds and in the work that you do with others.
Yeah, I just feel like I'm gonna bake fortune cookies for both of you, and that's how I'm gonna get rich. That's my new career path. Like when I'm done, I'm just gonna make fortune cookies of everything you both say. That's it. So just so you guys know, it's coming. If you see me pipping out fortune cookies out of Montana, you know I'm retired. That's it. That's it. I'm like sitting over here and I'm trying to take like show notes, and I was like, I'm not typing any of this shit. I can't even get it all out. It's just
But
gold.
George,
So
I
Brian,
want to flip it back on you. I know this is your show, but I want to throw a question back at you, brother.
throw it to
Because
me.
I say to you all the time that you are one of the greatest communicators that I have ever met. And your ability to actually release and surrender in the moment, allow yourself to be the vessel for the message that needs to be told in your flow state, and how you articulate and put together words and thoughts and structures is not only your gift in connecting with people, but your gift in helping people understand how to get a deep, integrous relationship with themselves and to use that to permeate into all of the other relationships in their world. Because you always say, right, you don't have a customer problem. You don't have an acquisition problem. You don't have a marketing problem. You've got a relationship problem. And where does that start?
Yep. And you know what? I'll take it even deeper after listening to both of you. It's a relationship with your feelings, right? Because if we really get into this, right? Like this is why the three of us work so well together. But where that came from, like I actually have never even told this story of like where the RBA even came from. The relationship speed algorithm thing was like literally an accident. It was in a keynote, and it was literally I was being an asshole because I had this like heckler in the audience, like literally a giant heckler in the audience. And I was talking about, and this was like early on in my career. And so I was talking about like how the one thing, and I wasn't as articulate back then. I was like, the one thing that you can always win with is the human. And I would use a tangible example. I'm like, listen, if we send 10 customers into a grocery store and we have 5 of them go through one teller who ignores them and is rude to them, and we have 5 go through another teller who asks them questions and acknowledges their day, like, which one do you think is fucking coming back?
That's
And I was like, this is common sense, right? And then this dude, I was talking about marketing. I swear to God, back of the room, 1,000 people in the audience, dude's like, that's bullshit. And Brian, you know me, I was young. I don't think I had done all the work. And it was
you
like
reacted, you didn't respond.
someone threw a red curtain in front of a bull and was like, sit. And I was like, wrong answer, bro. And so I was like, stand up. And then I was like, expound for me. And he's like, well, that's bullshit and blah, 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 blah. And I'm taking my glasses off for this. I looked at him and I said, I see a ring on your finger. And he said, yeah. I said, how's your marriage going? And he said, we're separated. I said, sit down. I just fixed your marketing.
Ooh.
And everybody just went dead silent.
Wow.
Like nobody knew what to do.
So good.
Nobody.
That's a mic drop moment.
So good.
And then I stood there for a minute and I was like, okay. And I was like, hey, listen, I'm not trying to be mean, but typically the results that we get around us come from what we have behind closed doors. And I know this because this is the work that I have to do. And I can tell you that my business and the results in my business have a direct correlation between the depth of happiness I have with those closest to me, my wife, my kids, my friends. And I was like, I can tell you what your business looks like if you show me your
Oh
relationships,
yeah.
or if you show me your business, I will tell you what your relationships look like.
1000%,
And
brother.
so it was kind of like out of nowhere. And then I ended that talk and it was like I was kind of being a smartass. I was like, hey, sir, just so you know, this is why I think relationships beat algorithms. And that was literally how it came out. It was like the end of this talk.
So
And it started making sense. And so I started going to companies and I started consulting and I was doing all of it already. But what I started realizing is like I'd walk into a company and I'd see the C-suite and then I would see the team, right? And I would meet with them. And Brian, you know me, I do this. I walk and I meet with everybody. And I'm like, all right, tell me what's going on, right? And I noticed only the C-suite's talking. No one else is saying a word. And I'm like, oh, I got this.
Yep.
Okay,
Oh yeah.
cool. And so I finish meeting one, I send the C-suite out and I give the team and I'm like, listen, my job's to fire your boss. Give me all the truth, all of it. I won't say a word, but tell me everything. And they're like, right. And then I go to the boss and I'm like, tell me everything you hate about your team. And he's like, and then what I had was these
Oh
ingredients
yeah.
of like middle ground. And I realized they were saying the same damn thing, right? They wanted the same thing. And it was funny because the moment we started like co-communicating and coming to common ground, all of a sudden that week when I was in office, we didn't change social, we didn't do messaging, we didn't do anything. Efficiency became better, content became better, comments and engagement and captions became better because the team felt seen and heard. And then the boss felt seen and heard. And so then together they weren't on defense the entire time. And so then I started realizing, like, wow, what's the problem? And I was like, well, the boss won't share his feelings. Cool. So then the team can't share theirs. And then it permeates out into the world. And so I was like, with yourself, your team, and your customers informed in that order. And to say that, the reason being is what you both nailed so powerfully. And Katie, I think one of the most powerful things that you said, and I had to write it down, it's when somebody opens your product or uses your service, can they feel your soul? Right? And when we talk about selling, when we talk about marketing, the definition of it is a transference of energy.
Mm.
That's it. And if we're not intentional about it, we're not transferring the desired state that we wish.
That's right.
And so when you talk about feelings, Brian, what I think about all of it is like I look at my career and the most successful parts of my career on paper were also when I was the most miserable, checking boxes because
Right.
I was running from my feelings, which is why that pattern repeated. It was all lost and all lost and all lost, right? New boss, same result, new relationship, same result, new million, same result, lost it all, right? Over and
Yeah.
over and over again. And it's really interesting that as we sit here and the reason we're doing this, I think is because I was convinced, Brian, because of my narrative that if I had trauma in my life, that meant the rest of my life to heal it had to be as hard as what caused the trauma.
Oh man, I get that.
And so I had this measuring stick. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, I was sexually abused and I saw war and I saw people dead and I did things that no human should ever have to do. And I've been suffering for 32 years. So if I dated somebody for a year, then it should take me 4 months to get over the breakup by the math that we had in junior high. So if I had trauma for 32, maybe 10, 15 years of suffering and then I'll be happy. Right. And so that was the narrative that I had. And entrepreneurship was the perfect drug because it's a drug that allows you to be an addict in plain sight.
yeah,
You're rewarded.
1000%.
yeah.
And dude,
You're
It
rewarded
gets
for your
praised.
addiction. And so
It gets
it does
praised.
get praised. And then
Mhm.
all of a sudden that external success is what we seek for validation when we're really just trying to connect more deeply with ourselves and those that are closest to us, right? So we fill that
Yep.
through these different mechanisms to protect ourselves, to hide behind elements to the world so that we can control, right? I've hidden behind my words before, I've hidden behind the external things. And the more vulnerable we are, what we don't recognize is that true strength actually hides behind vulnerability. What you
Mhm.
just articulated as well, and it goes back to one of the quotes from our friend Alex Sharfin. If you're constantly putting out fires in your life and in your business, there's a good chance you're the arsonist. Right? I've said for a long time that everything begins and ends with you. But what you just articulated as well is so often what we do. I did it multiple times, right? Where it's like I repeated the exact same cycle, thinking if I chase this strategy or this tactic, or I make this pivot, or I make this amount of money, or I get this car, or I get this house, all of a sudden it's going to make all of my pain and suffering internally go away. And inevitably, it
Mhm.
never does. Right. And so that's
Never.
one of the things that we recognize is it's not the strategy and tactics that keep people stuck. They're critically important in building and scaling businesses. They're critically important in understanding how to develop down that path, but they're not what keeps us stuck. It's a combination of those emotional triggers, behavioral patterns, and environmental conditioning, which is why people see those same patterns repeat over and over again and never understand how to actually get to the root so they can move through it.
Mhm. And I love it. So I'm going to segue over to you for a minute, Katie. But Brian, I want to wrap this point because I know this is my show and it's the three of us. So I'm going to make it about you guys because they listen to me enough. So they want some fresh perspectives. But I think for me, for everybody listening, like when I think about what we do and why we do, it almost for 5 to 10 years of my life was unbelievable to me that the path to success was actually that simple, right? Like the paradigm that exists because of the world, and I'm a marketer, so I have to take, painful credit for this, is that even the paradigm that we live in literally perpetuates pain. It perpetuates stagnation. It perpetuates symptoms instead of root cause because everybody makes money when everybody is sick. And so even in what was happening, I was like, there's no way. There's no way that like I saw that I did that. And in one breathwork session with a journal that I can feel better. I'm like, wait, I feel better? No, you're lying, George. Nope. Nope. Where's the pain? And then what's crazy though is like we laugh about that, but then I would go engage in self-sabotaging behavior, right? Because I know, Brian, we're like brothers, bro. I know. Because then I was like, oh, and for me and Katie, I'm gonna throw this lobby a question to you. My biggest struggle is I was so comfortable in the chaos that I didn't have an identity without it. And so for me, even when there was that space, if I had taken the time to take a breath and look, I'm like, wow, I have everything I've wanted. I have everything, the gratitude, the life. But I was like, this is uncomfortable because it's comfortable. Break it all. Break it all. And then that's where I'd start to go. So Katie is somebody who I'm gonna change your moniker a little bit to like I'm a product designer to I'm an experience designer because I believe you create experiences and you use products as the tool
I
or the
totally agree.
bridge.
Yeah.
But as that experience designer, like when you sit here and say like I wanted them to feel me, I wanted the intention, I wanted them to open a package
Mhm.
and know my
Yeah.
value and know my mission.
Yeah.
I would venture to say that the first step of that is really being embodied with your mission and vision.
Yes.
And so what does that look like for the average person? Like they're like, okay, Katie, I want them to feel this, but I'm stuck because I have trauma and I don't know who I am without the story. And like, I know I want to be a lighthouse and I know I want to be different, but every time I go to share it, it's like purgatory. And we know it's one step out the door, but like, how do you help people or what do you recommend they do to like really know that vision and that clarity and start to practice embodying it?
So, big picture, what I help people do is I help them create a powerful operating system. Everything that you do, the way you view the world, the words that you even use, the way you describe yourself, the way you describe your relationships and your business, all of that is coming from what I call an operating system. And when you're not aware of
Mhm.
that, you have the default operating system, right? You have what your parents have believed and taught you to be true. You have your environment, what you were taught at school. All of those things are creating what I call a default operating system. When you wake up and you realize that you can create your own operating system that then helps you move and navigate the world the way you want to, you start to become curious. Well, how do I do that? And that's what I'm helping people do. And the first 3 steps, it's a 5-step process, but the first step is you have to be aware of what you're currently doing. You have to be aware of where you're getting in your own way. And it's not easy. And I help people navigate that. The second is you have to understand how to tell the brutal truth. The truth
Mhm.
that's uncomfortable, the truth that you've been hiding from yourself, the truth that you want nobody to know about you. You have to understand how to tell the truth. Then you have to make a decision and redefine how you're viewing everything, how you view yourself, how you're
Mm.
viewing, and because all of it is being navigated through stories. And so as you extract all of this, you start to see the story that you've created for yourself. And again, you can put yourself in the driver's seat and use your own desire and rewrite that story. A story that excites you, a
Mm.
story that energizes you. So rather than feeling drag, rather than feeling small and insignificant and reacting to that, which is what most people do, right? It's not easy to navigate this. And this is what makes it so difficult for people is they can understand it in concept. And the gap is understanding it in concept and then actually being able to apply it and live it. Because when you understand it in concept, but you're not living it, nothing changes.
Mm.
And it has to be applied in your life.
Yeah, and
George, do you mind if I ask her a question
please go.
to expand on that? Because again, I just got to spend some really beautiful time witnessing magic on a couch as she was sharing her story. And you gave multiple moments where you had to identify a misalignment in your truth
Totally.
and then had to step into living it.
Yes.
There's a couple that are extremely powerful. I'm not going to point you at any, but I would like you to describe one of those moments in your life where you felt that
Yeah.
you were not living in your truth
Yeah.
and how it was actually impacting you at the time and what happened when you moved through that.
Did you say something, George?
Oh no, I coughed. I apologize.
Oh, okay. Okay. Well, to your point where you're talking about, like, one of the early moments I remember this happening for me personally is I was a stay-at-home mother of two. I had done very well in school. I'd gotten a design degree. I had received a scholarship from General Motors. I'd won national awards for my furniture design. But from a really young age, the narrative that I had created for myself is that my number one role and responsibility, and only, I might add, is to be a stay-at-home mom. It was what had been modeled to me. It's what I had felt was, and I still believe is like a part of my divine journey. What I didn't realize is that is not limited to being able to also do something else. And so in my life, as I was doing that, there was a big part of me that was not being seen, that was not growing and developing anymore. And it just was, I don't know, supposed to disappear. And there was a piece of me that was saying, that's not okay. And you have gifts and talents. And yes, you're sharing them with your family, and other people need to experience that too. And so I was in this internal battle because I felt like God was giving me so many crazy opportunities to begin to develop a business, not because I needed the business, but because he wanted me to grow and develop. And I was saying no to them because my number one was being this stay-at-home divine mother, right? And as I was in this battle, one day I had a new thought, which was, Katie, you know design, you know creation. You're looking for proof that you can be a business owner, an entrepreneur, and a present mother. You don't see that model, but that doesn't mean that you can't create her,
Mhm.
the woman who knows and understands how to do those things. And I rewrote my story in that moment. It was okay. My identity is not just a stay-at-home mom, which for some people, that's their path forward, and that's great and that's awesome. But for me, like, when I told the brutal truth, that wasn't my story. That wasn't my desire that was happening inside of me. And there were so many question marks once I started to open up to that. I didn't know how to do all of those things, but the first thing that had to happen was me making that shift. And I'm creating the kind of woman that maybe the world's never seen before. And I'm committed to doing that and to figuring it out.
Katie,
And from what I understand, everything in your world, your relationship, your business,
Everything changed.
literally exponentially took
Yeah.
off once you fully owned you.
Yes.
and with that, Katie, like owning you, was there a part of you that you knew internally and you're like, I'm gonna own this, and then you told your husband and those around you? Or is there a part of you that was like, okay, I think this is it, and you enrolled the people around you into the possibility, and then through sharing that story, it became accountability for you to step into that?
So my awareness at that time was really limited,
Mm.
and I wasn't fully aware of everything that was happening. And I honestly was afraid to have those conversations with people. So no, I didn't have a conversation with anybody. I didn't prepare them. I didn't show them the old story and the new one. No, I didn't.
Okay. And so did you just start down that path looking for clarity, and collected the momentum, and the pieces came, right? Piece by piece by piece.
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I approached it like a design project, and I actually started clipping out photos of women who I thought were kind of representative of this woman who was professional, who was in the business world, who was at board meetings, and was making cinnamon rolls with their kids on the weekends. So
Mhm.
I started to clip out visuals, and I had it on the back of my bathroom mirror. And so every day when I would brush my teeth or put on makeup, I was seeing that visual, reminding myself that I'm letting go of who I thought I was supposed to be. And I am stepping into a new version of myself that I hadn't seen previously, but that I now was telling the truth to say that I desire this.
Mm.
Do I have permission to add on to that?
Go for it. Yeah.
You said something yesterday that I think is really important, and it resonates deeply with me. Um, there are times when I have not seen myself clearly, but my partner or someone else in my life has. And so I know that in some of my darkest times, those moments where I'm feeling the resistance and energy drain, feeling like I can't push through this next step to become whatever I'm supposed to be or whoever I'm supposed to be on the other side, I've had my wife, I've had other individuals who've given me a nudge. And I know that for you,
Oh, yeah.
there have been multiple situations. I mean, you talked about the situation at a trade show where your husband literally pulled you aside and was like, Katie, where are you?
Yeah.
Like, what do you like? Who are you
Where's
right now?
Katie?
Like, where's Katie? Because as soon as you owned and stepped into Katie, but you didn't even see it. And so to me, that's why the who is so important, right? Like it's,
Mhm.
do you know who you are? Do you know who you're doing this for? Do you know who you're doing this with? And do you know who you're going to impact?
Mhm.
Because sometimes you have to realign with who you're doing it for. Sometimes who you're doing it with has to nudge you onto your own path so that you can live into who you are, because you might be blind in the moment. And so I don't want to take any of the credit away from you, but I think because you're the one who did the work, you're the one who made the decisions, you're the ones who did that. But I know that in my life, there have been
Yeah.
nudges.
Oh,
How have those
100%.
nudges impacted you?
100%. Like to expand upon what he's talking about, that story in Vegas, like so much, like literally going into debt, living on food storage, making 4 loaves of bread a week, grinding wheat. I mean, like that was the life that I was living. And then I'm at this trade show all of a sudden, and stores, real store buyers, Target, Nordstrom, Costco, like they want to buy my product. And all of a sudden, I felt like I was having to hide the fact that I wasn't a real businesswoman and that I didn't actually know what I was doing and that I was just figuring it out as I went along and that I was shipping these products from my garage. Like I was terrified that they were all going to figure this out about me. And that was kind of where I was rooted in that moment, right?
Mhm.
Was fear.
Mhm.
And my husband could sense it. And he pulled me out of the booth, as Brian mentioned, and asked that question. And I cracked open and I shared all of my fears with him. And in that moment, he shared something so wise with me. He said, Katie, these people are not here expecting you to be something that you're not.
Mm.
They just like, everybody loves Katie.
That's
Just
right.
be Katie and ask them, do you want 25 or 50 tubs for your store?
Mhm.
And literally in that moment, George, I shifted from that place of fear to a place of confidence and certainty in who I am.
Mhm.
Katie is genuine. Katie is real. Katie's actually interested in human beings. So it went from Katie, who's weaning her 1-year-old and not a real businesswoman, and trying to talk to this real store buyer from Target and all the fear that comes with that, to Katie, the human, who's genuinely interested in the store buyer who might also be human, right? And have a
Mhm.
family
Might also.
and have like real human things going on in their life. And all of a sudden, like my shoulders went up and I know I could look people straight in the eyes, speak with confidence. Was I telling them those things that I was afraid of? No, I didn't lead with that, but I wasn't hiding it.
Mhm.
And so I was in the conversation, human to human, connecting with them. And like amazing thing happened from that point on, George. And like also I had people coming into the booth asking if they could invest in me.
Mhm.
They wanted to know how to participate and what I was doing. And like I was hanging with him. And this at one point, he was the CEO of Carter's. He was
Mhm.
like, I just have to tell you, like, we'd been standing there talking for like 15, 20 minutes. He said, you're an incredible saleswoman and an amazing negotiator.
Mhm.
I didn't
Being Katie.
I knew nothing about either one of those things. Like I was utilizing zero tactics. And I just said, thank you.
Imagine.
Yeah.
That's why I have a career. Like Katie just summed up my entire career in 1 minute. I was using zero tactics and I was using myself. There we
Yeah.
go.
Yes. Yes.
I love it. I love it. And I actually right before we recorded this, I recorded a show that said you have the secrets because the secret weapon is you. Right. And so Brian,
Yes.
I'm gonna lobby over to you because one of the things that I kept catching and kept hearing, and I know Brian and I had this, that's why I'm coming to you, Brian, is that I had a rigid relationship with my identity because it gave me a new place to hide, right? And so I was the guy who almost lost his legs and had 7 concussions and had blank. And it's funny because nobody even knows that shit anymore. And they're like, I'm shocked when someone's like, wait, what happened? I'm like, wait, you don't know? And they're like, no, I'm like, fuck, I've grown a lot. Damn. Whew. Hold on. Give me a moment. And they're like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm just shocked you didn't know my whole life story in 60 seconds. Right? Because I used to like literally like vulnerability bomb people because it was my
Yeah.
new protective measure. Right.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
one of the things that I think I've noticed so much and is so powerful about you two, myself included, I will give myself kudos, is that me changes every day, right?
Mm.
Me changes
Yes.
every day. It's like I'm a
Yes.
chameleon, and that's the unique part about me. And so it took me a long time to let go of the rigidity of my quote unquote identity. And so,
Yeah.
Brian, I would love for you to talk about, because this is something that you're the absolute king of. I feel like uprooting triggers and emotions
Yeah.
start to unravel the paradigm of this false sense of security that having an identity gives us.
Yeah. I could talk for years on this. I
Go
get deeply
for it.
passionate about it, but I'll I'll talk about this through some stories and transitions in my life, because I think that's what's going to be relatable. I talked about this mental and emotional narrative that I created, and very quickly, again, nobody knows my story, or some people do, but I was run over by a truck. My left arm was torn off, severed, 24 surgeries, years of adversity. And in the very beginning, what was interesting is that was one of the things I remember most when I was 7 years old. Right after my injury, I've got a sling and a teddy bear in between, because I've got to have it at a 90-degree angle away from my body. And adults consistently would say, "Brian, what happened to your arm?" Expecting me to give the normal, like, "Oh, I fell off my bike," or "I fell off the jungle gym," or like, "I was playing ball and I tripped and fell." And I would look at them deadpan in the eyes, because I was confident in my own narrative, which was I was run over by a truck and my left arm was torn off.
Mm-hmm.
I got really used to seeing jaws hit the floor. And all of a sudden, like, the disbelief you would see flip over their face, and they'd look to my parents for validation. They didn't even believe my own story, my own truth. They didn't believe. So it was conditioned into me that although this was now becoming a part of my identity, I also didn't want to be confined based on the lens others were viewing me through in what they'd be capable of in my situation. So that's when I created that mental narrative. I'm tough, I'm strong, I'm capable, I can do it myself. And by the way, that served me very well for 13 years until I re-broke my arm snowboarding. And all of a sudden I'm isolated and alone. And I realized the power of our narratives, because the world had bought into mine. It's not that I didn't have friends. It's not that I didn't have family that loved me. It's that they bought into my narrative. Brian's good. He's strong. He's capable. If he needs our help, he'll ask for it. But oh, by the way, I didn't have the courage or vulnerability at the time to actually ask for help, even though I was in the most vulnerable place I'd been as an adult up until that point. So I looked outside and I said, I'm going to focus on human connection, because that's what I was missing. Right. And then vulnerability and authenticity became the glue that bound that human connection. I got really good at hiding behind narratives, sharing just enough vulnerability to get others to let their wall down. And then I'd go deep into their, right?
Stop talking
My
about me.
wall was protecting me through the questions I asked. I could share just enough that they felt that they were connected, got to know me. But that was also a place of control, hiding behind my words. I did that strategically and tactically. And I would go as far as saying I mastered it over the course of the next 13 years. Then all of a sudden I'm laying on the couch with my daughter one day. She leans over, puts her arm around my neck, gives me a kiss on the cheek, and I start bawling. I don't cry normally. And I want to be really clear. I wish I did. I wish that I had that ability to just let myself be more free with my tears, but I conditioned it out of myself. And maybe someday it won't be so much effort. But when I cried out of pure joy, I all of a sudden realized I wasn't experiencing fear, guilt, shame, anything on the other spectrum in the same way if I'd never felt joy this way. So it caused me to go a little bit deeper. That's when I uncovered my own shame, part of the narrative that was trapping me. But what I also realized is that human connection without emotion isn't really human connection. So again, I had 2 13-year periods, 26 years of patterning. And when I shut off physical pain because my ability to cope exceeded my demands in that environment, I also shut off emotional pain, and I didn't bring it back for almost 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was through that journey that I started to really understand like where shame was impacting, right? The two narratives of shame is you're not worthy, you're not good enough. And the other one is when you shut that down, you show up in the arena. It's, who do you think you are? That's the one I lived primarily. And I'd be lying if I said I didn't ever get tapped by worth, but I literally pulled the throttle back in my life because the bigger I lived, the more I felt I needed to apologize to people around me.
Mm-hmm.
And that was exactly who I was. And what I started to realize is that it was my big energy that was actually causing insecurity in other people sometimes that I was then receiving as it was my fault. I was the one in the wrong. And I was creating this narrative as well that who I was wasn't good enough, perpetuated by the energy and divide by just who I was. And so I had to lean into that because when you start to recognize that each one of these places can start to really create a narrative on who we are that's incongruent with who we actually are, that's when all of a sudden we start feeling these emotions and energy drains in places because that means we're out of alignment.
Mm-hmm.
And so again, that's what I use is I try to challenge any narrative around identity at this point, other than just allowing to be myself here in the moment. Katie talked a lot about presence yesterday, which is something that I deeply identify with. I try to be where my feet are in every single moment because that's when I can be the purest version of who I am and not wrapped up in any ego-based consciousness or identity that's false based on how the world receives me. So that's a very quick narrative around it, brother, but
okay, you can stop quantifying short, quick. Like, Brian, we want to hear you talk. Can you just talk, please? Thank you. Just get that out of the way. Cool.
See, that's my own shame kicking me there, right?
Shut up. I love you. It's great. Okay, shut the fuck up. Stop. You're like your own heckler. Like you're like your own plant, right? It's like if you could throw your voice, you'd be the best stand-up ever because you could be your own heckler and nobody would know. And it's so good. It's so good. So what you said, I think, is huge, and I want to make a point on this because for everybody wondering, the three amigos here, i.e., we're just following the bright light of sunshine, Katie, to have a positive impact on the world. We're doing some stuff together. We want to do events together. We're doing some stuff to really unlock the power of you. But Brian, one of the things that I think is so powerful, and Katie, I'm going to come back to you in a minute, but what we talked about, Brian, I wanted you to share that because it's the same for me. Like it was the same story, right? It was a survival mechanism though. It wasn't ill-intentioned. It wasn't anything. It served to survive. And then once the wound started to heal, we had to start uprooting those patterns, change the come from. And now it's one of the greatest skill sets that any human being can have to be able to meet there. But one of the things that I think I needed to hear a long time ago that nobody told me is that it's messy. And the
Oh yeah.
messy is what makes it so beautiful. Like you've heard for years, like the message is in the mess, right? Like it's there. And because I lived with so much trauma, I had such a polarizing view of what it should look like. I thought the opposite was just numb or steady or up, right? And so then I would rob myself of joy. I would rob myself of gratitude. I would rob myself of happiness and experiences because the up of positivity felt just as bad, if not worse, than the down
Oh,
of
dude,
the
I get
chaos
that deeply. Whew.
because I had more practice and more reps in chaos than I had in positivity and possibility. And so, what I wish somebody told me, and this is how I see you, Brian, and myself, it's like, you ever watch one of those cheesy superhero movies where the person figures out in that moment they have a superpower and they break everything, right? I feel like that's what the work of entrepreneurship is. It's
Yeah.
the moment you make a choice to step into the unknown, you're basically fast tracking yourself for one of the loneliest, powerful, catalyst transforming experiences of your life. But in order to get there, you have to be willing to make a mess. You're going to
Mhm.
have to shoot that rainbow shit out of your belly for 6 years before somebody realizes you're a Care Bear, right? Like you're not a Care Bear in the beginning. You might be a Teletubby with a funny shape on your head, but like nobody knows that that's like a heart coming out of your belly because right now we're just like shotgunning everybody. And so I just think it's really important for everybody to understand like we hear Katie talking about your vision and being in alignment and doing it. When you start releasing things, sometimes that can get messy. We talk
Yes.
about Brian talking about emotion and uprooting it and how everything is based in feeling. Well, feeling means you actually fucking feel it. Like you feel it. And Stefanos is one of my best friends and also coaches and teachers and mentors, and he's been the best one for me ever. And I've shared this with Brian because, he's my best friend and they just had a baby 2 days ago. Congrats, bro. I love you, man. Um, he'll be the one, but it's like if I pick up the phone, if I call Brian, typically it's because there's a fire, right? Occasionally we'll text, we text pretty good, but if the phone's ringing, Brian's pretty much safe to assume that like something's burning down or I'm about to burn something down, right? Like it's like, okay, cool, like pattern interrupt. But what I love about Brian, just like Stephanos, is Brian's a master of witness, right? He doesn't solve anything. He doesn't give me anything. He even asks me, do you want me to tell you what you already know? And I'm like, no, I just needed to vent for a minute. And I had to get comfortable being with this feeling and not trying to change it. Right. And that coexisting with that feeling is so big. And Stephanos will do the same thing. And I'm like, hey, man, what do I do? And he's like, do you feel something? I'm like, yeah. He's like, sit with it longer. I was like, what? And he's like, you sit with it till you feel nothing. And then you know it's time to act. And so I just wanted to say for everybody listening to this, like, whatever it is, like, maybe you don't have the life you want or the vision or the relationship or the business or the all of it. And Katie, this is where I'm going to lobby to you. You talked about step number one in your 5-step process being having an accurate view of your current state.
Yeah.
An accurate view of your current state. Now,
Yeah.
for me, typically, if I'm looking in the mirror, I look over my shoulder because I'm afraid to look at my own eyeballs because the current state and the truth of it scares me a little bit. Carries a little bit of shame, carries a little bit of guilt. Sometimes there's some fault. And I feel like it's a titration and a practice, right? And so, what do you think, Katie, are like some of the most important things for people to think about or narratives to have or support systems around to help them really see that accurate current state so that they can get that awareness? And the reason I'm saying this is because we're going to talk to people about this in the Area Review Challenge. But one of the things that I did for so long was like, oh, my marriage is broken or Lindsay's unhappy. Brian, what book do I read? He's like, this one. I'm like, cool. oh, it gave me something to do. Go do it. And I would do it and I would sprint at it, but nothing underneath changed because I wasn't acknowledging the current state, right? I was picking a symptom and then I was trying to solve the symptom, hoping it would eradicate the disease. And it took me probably 37 years to be able to sit down and have an honest conversation about the current state. And so, Katie, I would like to give everybody a fast pass if possible. And I feel like you're the queen of doing this. And so, what is your advice or tips for people to find a healthy monogamous relationship with their current state?
Well, to help people understand why awareness is so important, you cannot change what you cannot see. And that's why you have to start there, because what's getting in the way is you, but you're absolutely blind to it and you
Hmm.
can't see it. And this is why all three of us are doing the work that we're doing, because we're trying to help people see how they're getting in their own way. And you also need to understand that there are pieces of you that don't want to see it. And in particular, as somebody, especially if it's somebody external and even internally, as you start to see it, there's a part of you that pops up called the ego that doesn't want to see it and wants to point the finger, wants to blame, wants to explain, wants to throw out all kinds of excuses and give us the backstory behind why you're doing that thing that you're doing and why you're doing it that way, whatever it is, right? That will stop all progress, all progress. So you have to acknowledge that this is uncomfortable, that there's a big part of you that's not you that is going to want to stop it from happening. And you have to make the decision that you want to do it anyways
Hmm.
and recognize that that pain, that discomfort it is the key to growth. And unless you can get comfortable with the discomfort, you're not going to be able to walk through that. And so
Hmm.
you have to make a decision that I want to be uncomfortable because I
Hmm.
know that the growth and the progress that I want, the success, the connection, everything that you want is on the other side of that discomfort. So you have to
Hmm.
consciously make a decision that I want to walk through the discomfort. And it's going to be uncomfortable. It's going to be painful. There's going to be a part of me inside that's kicking and screaming and saying, don't do it. It's going to feel like death. But what's dying is your ego, not your infinite
Hmm.
self.
Mm.
I'm just gonna let that marinate for like
Yeah,
7 seconds, like just like maybe seven. I just want to give it a moment of silence.
I felt that.
Yes. Yes. And what I find really interesting about this, it's like, you have somebody who's like somebody who does an Ironman, right? I think they're sadistic as shit because I've done one, right? That pain of training is 100 times greater than any feeling I've ever had to sit with, but yet will justify. You know what? I don't want to feel my feelings. So I'm going to go ride a bike for 7 hours and pretend I don't have them as I
Yeah.
like literally torture myself, right?
Yeah.
Or it's
Yeah.
like, one personal development teacher for me a long time ago, kept talking about how I was creating chaos and boom, 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 boom. And I was like, okay. And she looked me dead in the eye. She's like, you ever been in a car accident? I'm like, yes, a lot. And she's like, okay, we'll talk about that one later. But do you remember the feeling? And I was like, I do. And she's like, the pit in your stomach, like, or when you see a cop and you think you're going to get pulled over, you almost miss an accident. She's like, that feeling, that feeling I'm talking about? Yeah. She's like, what is that feeling? I'm like, sucks. It's horrible. It's pain.
Yeah.
It's anguish. It's fear. Like I might die. Right. And she's like, cool. She's like, you ever been on a roller coaster? I was like, yeah. She's like, one that scared you? I'm like, yeah. She, what was the feeling like? And I looked at her and like, and I literally like flicked her off. And I was like, don't finish this. Like, don't. It's too simple for me to even want to listen to you right now. She's like, what was the feeling like? And I was like, this ain't.
Yeah.
And she's like, so why? Why one right? Why one wrong? And I realized for me, Brian, most of my life, I was collecting evidence for the story rather than for my true happiness and my presence.
Dude, so powerful. Like so powerful. That is exactly the point I was making earlier around like delabeling even emotions. Cause there are times now that I'm just trying to identify the energy that I'm experiencing, right?
Mhm.
Because in a prior period of life, I might have this energy that I would identify as an emotion, as anxiety or stress or fear, legitimately. And then when I calm myself down to go through that paradigm of think about my thinking, think about my feeling, feel my thinking, feel my feeling, I'm all of a sudden in this position where I'm like, wait a minute, I'm not stressed. I'm not anxious. This is just energy waiting to be deployed. And so sometimes we've put a label or a narrative even around what we're experiencing. Sometimes that even if we go to the level of trying to say, well, what emotion is that? What are you feeling? Right? We sometimes can't even define that accurately because we've lost the art of feeling. And so often what we're actually doing with a lot of the work with our clients is it's like, okay, so I have a client who identifies with anxiety. Does it move through her body in the same way every single time? No, it doesn't. When she gets anxious because she's triggered at work, it shows up in one way. When she gets anxious because she feels like she's being challenged by her husband, it shows up another way. When she gets anxious because she feels like she's being judged externally by her parents or anybody else in her world, it shows up another way. All anxiety showed up in her body completely different. And so part of that is we've got to start to recognize that living between the poles, the gift in the gray area, is actually how we move forward. We have to start to shed the layers, not only of what the world has told us, but the ones and things that we've convinced ourselves have a narrative to it. That's what I love about what you said is that I use these things to look for feedback and variables to create the story. And that's also one of the reasons I like Ryan Holiday's quote so phenomenally. There's the event that happens, or there is no good or bad without us. There's the event that happens in the story we tell ourselves. The more we can put ourselves in that position of neutrality to see things both as the observer and the participant real time, to experience the environment that we're in, the more we see ourselves more clearly, and the more we're able to identify and move through relationships, business, and life more clearly.
I absolutely love it. And you know, it's so profound. And I want to say this for everybody. And I'm gonna ask you a question in a minute, Katie, about this is that would you agree, Brian and Katie, that literally the number one most important needle mover is aligned progress, right? Like just taking a step every day from a place of alignment, like aligned momentum, aligned progress to where like
100%.
100%.
That's where your power is.
1,000%.
Yes.
And I want to say this, and I want to say it because we're like, you know, I'm a little aggressive with some of the people I make fun of on the internet, but I'm toning it down, right? I'm being better now. I don't
Not
name drop
you, bro.
anymore. No. I feel like I'm the Robin Hood of the marketing world. I rob from the rich to give to the poor, and then I help the poor overtake the rich, and then the rich end up working for the poor, and it's this beautiful thing. It's
Can I just be Little John?
alignment.
I'll just be
Yeah,
Little
you
John.
can be Little John. Cool. I just think it's so cool. Like I love that movie with Kevin Costner when he shot the arrow through the dude's hand and he became like my hero.
Dude, seriously,
like,
the Kevin Costner one was the
yeah.
best one ever made, by the way. That and the Disney one.
And
the
so it's
cartoon
like
version.
Katie had like these women on her board, her vision board of like corporate room, board meeting, mom, and I have like Kevin Costner with an arrow through the hand. I'm like, that's who I'm going to be in the marketing world, right? Like that's it. And then here I am still going, and now Katie's on other women's vision boards, and all Katie has to do is look in the mirror at her own
I know.
reflection. Like I'm gonna take some notes, Katie. I'm taking notes.
What's up?
I might strive.
I'm learning every day from this one.
I might strive for something a little bit differently. It's so good that I, as one of the really good communicators, I completely lost my point, and I'm totally okay with it. So I'm gonna go now to you, Katie.
Well,
So
to kind of your point, like
go ahead.
it's interesting to hear you guys talk about pain and how like that was comfortable for you. And I didn't like pain. I didn't like uncomfortable feelings. I didn't like when I was like beating myself up or being self-critical. And so for a long time, without the awareness of what I was doing, like my whole life, when I look back and I reflect, all I was doing was trying to feel joy. That's it. Like I just wanted to feel joy in my business, in my family, with my kids, with my husband, in my faith, in my physicality. Like that's what gets me up at 5:30 in the morning to go work out and exercises. I know that I can feel joy when I take care of myself. And so that is what I think subconsciously I've always been seeking is joy. And I've been good at being aware of what brings me joy and what doesn't. And just making decisions to stay in the place and do the things and even talk to myself in a way where I can feel joy.
You know, that's powerful because people ask me like what my definition of success is, and it's joy, freedom, and fulfillment. Like truly at this point in my life, it used to be all the external elements, but what you just said is so powerful because what I also believe is that pain, suffering, and discomfort are all on the same scale. We just experience them differently.
Yeah.
Right. So that's one of the things that I talk about with pain and suffering is the distinction between them, which I'm not going to do today because it's not going to take too far away from the piece of it. But what's interesting is discomfort is kind of the 5K to pain's marriage. And so when you talk about living in the place of discomfort, it's the same concept because what he and I didn't understand is that the physical pain was the way that we numbed our suffering. We were
Mhm.
suffering inside for the same reason. We had a gap with the connection to joy, freedom, and fulfillment
Mhm.
because we didn't have the pathway to get there.
Yeah.
And so what
Mhm.
we had been conditioned is that pain was a lesser narrative than suffering, which is what we experienced inside. And so we put ourselves into these places of physical pain because that's also how we allowed ourselves to feel alive.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right. And so for you, you talk about it as discomfort. It's just a different state.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It's all the same concept.
Yeah.
But again, pain is one of those things that's hard to define because it's independent to the person experience.
Yeah.
So we can't draw any
Yep.
definitive conclusions around pain except for one thing.
Right.
It's a universal human experience.
100%.
And so if we recognize that it's a universal human experience, it's not about the severity, the length, or the intensity. At the end of the day, pain, discomfort, and suffering are all on a scale of things that we all choose to want to not have in our lives.
Yeah.
But they are inevitable in our lives.
They
So
absolutely are.
if we choose the elements of pain that we exist in,
Yes.
then we can avoid suffering on the other side. And that's also where we gain freedom.
Yeah.
And so this is the depth of this concept, which in the Area of You challenge, we may just end up going towards, which wasn't the initial plan. But I do think that this is the narrative that people have to understand is to get to freedom, you have to live in some level of discomfort or pain to avoid that suffering on the other side.
Yes. And I
Well,
want to,
and
that
go
was
ahead, Katie.
so
Go,
good.
go.
And I want to add one other thing. It's not that I don't have pain. I don't
Right.
have I think the distinction is you guys were doing those things
Correct.
to stay there and be numb in that.
For
and
sure.
I use pain as a signal.
Exactly.
It is a signal, and it's life saying, "Hey, Katie, pay attention. There's something really important for you to learn right here." And so I
1,000%. And I will,
deconstruct
oh, go
the
ahead.
pain, and I learn the lesson, and then I choose to apply that lesson into and I start living
Yep.
what I learned.
Which
Mhm.
is the exact same thing
And-
we've done. It just took us a hell of a lot longer to get to that place.
And I'm gonna synthesize this because what Brian and I weren't doing, where we weren't trying to feel pain to be numb, we were using pain to convince ourselves we weren't numb.
Wow.
There's a very
It's a
big
different narrative.
difference.
And that's why I was saying it made us feel alive.
Wow.
The only way you're going
So
to survive.
Yeah.
for us, we lived with such stimulus and such trauma
Uh-huh.
in the response that the day to day made us feel like we didn't belong. I'm speaking for Brian right now in
Yeah.
a
Accurate.
conversation
You
we
know
have
me well.
actually never had.
Yeah.
We've had many late night conversations, but this wasn't one of them, to the point where I used to run around and say, I'm a different human. I'm not normal. I can't feel, I can't empathize, and I can't have compassion. Permanent damage was done to me, and the only thing I feel is numb.
Yep.
And so then 1,000 skydives, scuba diving, mountain bike racer, spinal cord injuries, paralysis, barefoot skiing, like you name it, Brian and I have done it and owned all of it.
Yeah.
Because what we were chasing was this belief that we could be human like everybody else, because we lived with such intense pain that anything that wasn't on the top felt like it didn't even exist. And so we were actually conditioned that we were only alive when the stimulus is what most people would call a top 3 traumatic life
Yes.
experience.
Yeah.
1,000%. So deeply ingrained that we literally had to push ourselves to the limits of survival to feel alive. And it was
Mhm.
through that we learned to feel other pieces, but it just took a hell of a lot longer to get there.
I have a question for you. I'm so fascinated by all of this.
Please.
Because you lived in that pain and suffering for so long, your capacity for that was quite significant.
Huge.
Does that also then mean that your capacity for joy when you started to let it in was very, very small? And it's taken time for you to expand that.
Yes, 1,000%.
Beautiful.
And the most beautiful part, though, is that range is range regardless of the feeling.
Yes.
And so as a man who does this work and is constantly sharpening his edge, what I understand with that capacity is also what gives me the capacity to do what I do every
Exactly.
day
Yeah.
from a place of love and joy.
Yeah.
Like, it's easy for me to hold space and to take it on. And everyone's like, how do you do it? I was like, bro, this is like
Yeah.
preschool compared to what I've done to myself. Like, are you kidding me?
I
Like,
couldn't say it
I
better.
will
That's how I
pay
experienced it.
you.
Truly.
I will pay you to let me coach you if this is all I get to do. Like, this is heaven for me. Right. And so with it, yes, Katie, it's almost like a titrated behavior. Right. And because it's removing and uprooting and then intentionally coming in. But it also brings me to a point, and I was going to ask you, Katie, how you feel and experience joy now. Would you say by definition it is completely different than what you thought it would feel like when you were looking for joy?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. my greatest joys are in the small little things, like more and more
Mhm.
these days. I remember thinking that, being on the cover of Entrepreneur Magazine or being on the Ellen Show, like that to me was going to be the ultimate joy. And in fact, it was the opposite. It kind of felt empty
Yep.
afterwards. And it
Yep.
was really shocking and surprising. But like I'm in Vegas right now. Before I flew out to Vegas, I had an hour between my coaching calls and when I needed to head to the airport. And I made an avocado salad and a strawberry smoothie with my 8-year-old and 17-year-old. And we sat on the deck. We live in Puerto Rico on the beach. We sat on the deck eating this really healthy meal that we had cooked together in the kitchen. Cooked, it was all raw. We had prepared
Yeah.
together in the kitchen, watching the waves roll in, and like that to me, I would get emotional. I'm not crying right now, but I'm about to.
Mhm.
Like that to me, that was like the top. That is the ultimate joy for me in my life, is those
Uh,
kinds of experiences.
and what I love about what you just said and what I know about you deeply, and George, what you teed up so beautifully is the reason we're doing Era of You Challenge. Because at the end of the day, what each one of us has realized in our own respective ways, and I'm going to use you as the example because that was a perfect narrative that leads right where we need to go. What you also identified is that you were conditioned to chase all the what's of the world for a long
Yes.
time,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
What magazine
Mhm.
am I going to be on? What TV show am I going to be on? What business is going to look like? What amount of success? What amount of money? What house? What car? What everything, right?
Yeah.
All of us have done that. George and I talk about it. It's like, I mean,
Mhm.
geez, it's literally one of the things we did to give ourselves an identity externally that we felt we could be comfortable enough to live in because we always felt we had something
now
wrong
I
with
dri
us. But if we had $100,000 vehicle that we rolled up in for a minute, that felt really good, right?
Now I drive a station wagon and I live in
I love it.
Montana and I'm as happy
But
as a
that's my
pig in
point. We
shit.
literally have been, we went through this inquiring phase and now we're in like a complete shift of priority because what we started to realize in our own house and what you articulated beautifully is it's not about the what. What is important, but it is always going to feel empty without the who.
Yes.
And so
Mhm.
everything that we do is focusing again in this area of identifying. And I would say this is true for the three of us in the way that we live our world and how we interact with the world, people, the folks that we want to
Mhm.
impact, because we truly believe this to our core that if everybody can be who they are at the most authentic level, that they will then experience freedom and there's a ripple effect of that through the world. And so we focus so
1000%.
deeply on who we are and who we're becoming, right? Who we're doing this for, your family, who we're doing this with, your husband, each other, who we're going to impact. And so what she
Mhm.
recognized is that simplicity is not about the external, it's about the internal. It's about the things that are closest to us,
Mhm.
who we are. And so this Era of You challenge is literally because we all believe that it's time to close the era of what and start with the era of who, which begins with the era of you.
It's like it's cute. It's just cute. Just it makes so
So
much
much
sense. It's just
sense.
cute. I just love it when you say it. I
Yeah.
love it. The thing that keeps coming up for me because it's weird to say this that it took me 40 years to get this. But, I've had like a trend in marketing every single year that I've kind of gone after. Like 3 years ago, my whole coaching methodology for that year is your measuring stick is broken, right? Like your unit of measure is not an accurate representation of the impact you're having in the world, right? And then the next year it was about time. And this year it's about how monetization is defined wrong because everybody has it associated with a dollar and it's really about a person. And so my entire conversion metric for this entire year is just the depth of relationships. That's it. This. Like I've said yes to more things in the last month that will either never pay me or they'll pay me 100 million in the next 5 years and I don't give a fuck either way. Because my win was saying yes and embodying the yes because my win happened as Katie said in that small moment in the relationship that was deepened and the possibility together that we bonded over that if that happens the potential is just a dessert that I wouldn't even order in the first place. And so it's so powerful. So let me do this real quick.
Yeah.
Katie, can you give everybody and by the way, when you guys go to the Air Review page, the video, I edited it because I had fun. I promise you, Katie is not on a green screen. Not
That's
on a
the
green
deck that
screen.
I had lunch with my kids with.
I was literally editing this footage and I was like, this looks like a
It looks
composite
like a
green
green
screen.
screen. I thought the same thing.
And I'm like, Katie, I was like, Katie, stick your hand out in the air, like touch that leaf. Like, is that real? Like, stick it out. Like, it looks so insane. And I was like, this has to be fake. It's not fake. It's completely not fake. So let me tell everybody what happened here. So let me give you a little bit of backstory. Brian being Brian, Brian stands for all human possibility because Brian embodies the who over everything. Brian said, hey man, I have a guy. He's got a big heart. I said, I'm fucking it. No more needed. Introduces me to the guy. Guy says, yes, I fly to Denver. Me, Brian, Katie meet in person in Denver, all standing for some amazing humans possibility, which by the way, is still one of the greatest fucking human beings I've ever met in my life. Greg, goddamn rock star, bro. Keep it up. Don't ever change. And congrats on the baby. Um, and then this synergy starts happening. And then Brian gets ideas. Brian starts going. He texts both Katie and I and says, I have an idea. And we both respond, we're in. No idea what the idea is. Like none. We had no fucking clue. And then Brian was like, and Katie's in. I'm like, I'm double in. I don't care. I was like, I was already in, but I'm like double in. You could tell me to put on like a pink elephant suit and go stand on the corner. Like I'm in at this point. And so that's how this came to be. We got on a call and we're like, what can we do? Like, what do we want to do? Where do we go? Brian and I do events together. All three of us speak together. We co-create whenever we can. And we're like, how do we embody what it is that we're talking about just on this podcast? I'm like, well, we give it away. And so Brian being Mr. Infinity, the eight, Mr. like communicator master with like syllables and colloquies and fucking entendres and like everything you can imagine in his words, comes and puts this thing together and it just formulates itself perfectly. And we decided to come together to form the dream team to have the power or the era of you. And basically the three of us are co-teaching every day. How many days, Brian? 5 days. To where basically in 5 days, what are we charging? $8. We're charging $8 and we're donating the money, but we're making sure that you're willing to invest $8 in your possibility. Because if you're not, I love you. Slide into my DMs. I will hold space until you're ready. But if you can't give up a quad frappuccino of poison at Starbucks, then I don't know where we're going to go at this point. And so for 5 days, $8 every single day, we are going to get you accurately to your current state, a clear view of where you want to go. Brian is going to uproot, unravel, and take out the things that get in the way to give you fresh soil to till in who it is you want to be. And I'm going to share the tips, the tricks, and the ways to have an integrous relationship with yourself with a powerful support system around you so that the only possibility is your success. Something like that.
And Katie and her ability to help people design the future in addition to all of that is going to be beautiful. So to your point, numbers mean things to me. We're doing this on 4-4. 4 plus 4 equals 8. 8 turned on its sideways is an infinity. We are truly aligning the era of you to give you the greatest possibility to live in alignment with who you are, exactly who you want to become, and to truly live your no limits, infinite life. Because when you set yourself up right, it can become a self-regulating world where you know what fits and what doesn't, and who you're chasing in every moment. The who's that I'm doing this with are two of the greatest thought leaders and communicators that I've had the privilege of getting to interact with. Yeah. You, George, you, Katie. And so truly when I asked them, it's because I wouldn't be able to pull this off without the two of their hearts, their minds, and their ability to connect with you. Because that's what we care about, is lived potential.
And I want to say this, by the way, I didn't say Katie's name because the whole first part of everything I said, I was just referencing Katie. I only said Brian and me for the one sentence.
I knew that you did that. I just wanted to make sure everybody knew that was all where it was coming back to. Because we're just following Katie, let's be honest.
And I love it. And I'll take your compliment. By the way, I've noticed all three of us, we get to hold each other accountable to receiving
I'm not
compliments. Good at it. I'm here for this. No, Brian, here's what's funny. This is like my confessional, right? Brian always calls me. I have more screenshots of Brian text messages on my phone than anybody because I have a rainy day folder, right? I made an album called Rainy Day and I save my testimonials and I take text messages for my friends and the ones that matter and I save them. And Brian's constantly calling me like a great communicator, like one of the most incredible communicators. And literally probably until 3 weeks ago, he would say it and my brain would be like, cancel. And then one day I was like, shut the fuck up, biatch. And I like went to the mirror and I looked at it and I looked at myself and I read it to myself and I'm about to cry right now. And I started bawling and I started bawling and it unraveled even more because my consulting career, because I wasn't confident in who I was, became successful based on self-deprecation because it was easier to dehumanize myself than it was to stand in my possibility and be too much. And so, Brian, you've heard me say this. And I used to say, I'm not that good. I'm just addicted to hearing myself talk. So I might as well get paid for it.
Yeah.
And so you texted me and I sat with that and I realized how much subtle digging is in that statement to myself and my soul. Like how much I self-deprecate and I devalue and I take away the fabric of everything that I actually do every single day. And I realized, and it helped me collapse this paradigm that really the only thing that I have to do is shut my mouth and look up. And everything that I've sworn by is what I'm living. But it's a really, really powerful thing. And the one thing that I want to acknowledge all three of us on, but you two more than anything, and for everybody listening, the reason I choose to align with these two human beings is because there is zero lip service. And quite frankly, I don't hear most of what they say. I just pay attention to everything in their fucking life. And I mean, in person, their energy, their responses, their emotions, the way they show up online. They don't realize that I'm like a level 9 professional stage 9 clinger stalker on the internet.
Oh,
Like,
I know.
see everything.
You tell me every time I see
know.
you.
And I do. I'm like, well, I saw this. That was good. How was that? How'd that go? How'd that look? And really, it's beautiful when every ounce of evidence in the world that you see aligns to the state of being that both of you exhibit. And it's an absolute beautiful thing to witness and to be a part of. And so for everybody listening, for everybody watching, I'm going to tell you right now, the best thing you can do is sign up for this challenge. It's 5 days. We're going to be a video every single day. We got emails to support you. We are breaking it down. So every day you're going to have something tangible to put into practice, to put into your life. And we do have an ulterior motive. We do. I'll be the fucking one to say it. It's not money. It's that we want your butt in a seat in a room so we can hug and high five you and do this in person. And basically, it's starting online so that we can selfishly aggregate you into whatever exotic location that we bring you to help make a ripple and a dent in the world, because we're going to do events together as well. So that's my selfish reason for doing this, because I just like partying in person.
1,000% agree. Given our tech issues, our battery is about to die on our side. So I think that's the perfect place to start wrapping.
Well, perfect. So let's do this. So for everybody wondering, the easiest place, I'm going to make this really easy for you. If you want the link, just DM me, error of you. I will personally send it to you. If you don't want to DM me, totally fine. I'll slide into your DMs later, but you can go to arrowviewchallenge.com, right? It's ERAOFYOU challenge.com, right, Brian? Okay. Arrowview Challenge. We'll make it easy. We'll do the DM. So I'm going to ask you, like, do I have like 3%, 4%? Where am I at battery wise? Okay, cool. One quick question for each of you, because I have to stick with the format of my show. Katie, you're going to go first. So Katie, imagine that anybody listening and watching this had just got Men in Blacked. So the last hour and 12 minutes get erased from their entire memory. And all you have in this moment is 30 seconds to tattoo some wisdom on their soul that they're going to take with them for the rest of their life. What do you say?
There's a desire inside of you right now that maybe you haven't been speaking. And what I want you to know is that thing that you want, you can do it. And I believe it.
Thank you. Thank you. Brian, you've answered this question one too many times. So I think I'm going to go a little bit of another way. I don't want you to tattoo anything on anybody's soul, but there's people listening to this right now. And in this moment, they're open. They've made it this far. They have an awareness, a possibility, or an opening. What would you recommend somebody do in this moment to solidify or fill that bucket in the right way or make a step in the right direction?
If you're feeling it and you're open, sit with that a little bit longer. And then I want you to just transfer that into the recognition and understanding that you're not alone. We're all deeply connected. We're deeply connected to each other. We're energetically connected with each other. And at the end of the day, we all are wanting to have a significant impact on this world. It doesn't happen alone either. It only happens with collective impact. And so if you were moved by this, I just ask you to pay attention and acknowledge that, keep yourself in movement so that you can move others. because not only do we want to impact your life, but we want to elevate and empower you to be able to impact the lives of others. Because it's when you can use your own pain, your own struggles, your own ability to lean into who you are. When you do that, you create freedom and you can start doing that for others. We're still on the journey. No final destination, constant evolution of self. We keep each other accountable because guess what? That's where we are. And I have blind spots and issues every day. So you're not alone. We're in this with you. We're in this together. We absolutely can leave the mark on the world we want as individuals, but even stronger collectively.
Thank you so much. And I'm going to add one thing. I said this a long time ago. Everybody can get to the top of the mountain, but when you get up there alone, it's one of the loneliest places you can be. This is not a solo game. This is a team game. And I'm going to tell you right now, the world's greatest leaders, you'll never know exist because they make it about their people and not about them. And you have the honor and privilege of listening to these two who embody that every single day. Because there's people that stand for your greatness and there's people that take credit for your greatness. And these two amazing human beings will stand for your greatness. And I'm honored and humbled to be aligned with them. And so I highly recommend you DM me, you come jump into the Air Review Challenge, you come party with us, go follow Katie, go follow Brian. I'll have links to everything in the show notes. We're going to preserve battery life. We're going to let the iPhone do its thing. But guys, it's been an absolute pleasure. Katie, thank you so much. Brian, thank you so much. Like from the bottom of my heart, this was a gift. And so thank you guys for being here.
Thank you both for saying yes.
Yeah, that's my word this year. It's yes. So without further ado, you're either going to see me in the next episode or you'll hear me in your earballs, but it's time for me to stop bumping my gums and for you to listen to the outro. So here we go.